When you think of the average person, what comes to mind? Someone that wakes up to an alarm at like 8 a.m. to go to their 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and on the weekends they go to the bar? That's essentially what the weekend warrior is. But for the average weekend worker, the question that begins to form is, what makes these things average? How did these things become the standard, and really, who the hell made the standards? Have we just been doing this forever? And what influences us to follow them? Funny enough, these concepts are a much larger concept than I've actually presented them as. It's something that's been heavily documented in social psychology and has been used in every way you can imagine. They've even been used to make behaviors and attitudes the status quo of an entire generation. What are these things called? Social norms, and they're quite literally the reason why you act the way you do. So let's talk about it. Social norms, man. Social fucking norms. Instead of me beating around the bush, let me go ahead and describe them for you. According to an article from the APA, the American Psychological Association, the author Jessica Nolan concludes that social norms can be redefined as rules and standards that are understood by members of a group and that guide morally relevant social behavior by way of social sanctions instead of the force of laws. To break this down, let's think of all the unspoken rules that we follow in our lives. Take someone cutting in line for an example. If you see someone get cut in line, you're sitting there thinking, nah dog, that's crazy, no way he cut him. But in reality, there's no law against cutting someone in line. Hey, let me make sure that's right real quick, hold on. That's how strong social norms are, man. I literally had to double check to make sure that wasn't a fucking law, knowing it was a social norm. Cutting someone is rude and is generally frowned upon by at least 99% of the world. There's the 1% of motherfuckers cutting in line, you dirty motherfucker. Let's talk about another norm that you probably didn't expect to be a social norm. We taking it back to high school. One of the first social norms that we learn about without even knowing is this. You probably went to go grab your backpack, motherfucker. Do not lie, I know. But hearing that bell is something that we get conditioned to early on and follow without question. And what are the consequences of missing the bell? Oh, you get a tardy in the class, and too many of those lead you to an in-school suspension, but those aren't laws. And even thinking on this topic, how the fuck did teachers think we could get our books, go to the bathroom, get a drink less than 5 minutes? And if you really had to go to the bathroom, you know what I mean by that. You were chalked, bro. You about to be late. But as you have graduated high school, at least I'm hoping, you probably realize you don't have to worry about that damn bell anymore. And you got as much time as you need in the bathroom, you nasty. But even this social norm comes from something even more complex. It's something called a pipeline. For this example, this is the school to work pipeline. Let me explain. You likely had to go to school around 7 a.m. for about 6 hours, one class for each hour. But after 3 to 4 classes, you go to lunch for about 30 minutes, and you finish your day around 3 p.m. at most. Am I sounding correct? Yeah? Now let's look at your work schedule if you work a traditional job. You're probably now thinking how your high school schedule is identical to your work schedule. And that was by design. High schools implement a work-to-school pipeline, which is defined as a continuum of coordinated supports, services, and opportunities for children from birth through entry into and success in post-secondary education and career attainment. And one of those coordinated supports, your high school class schedule. You've been conditioned through social norms to seamlessly fit into a traditional corporate work schedule. This video isn't about pipelines, so let me change the topic before I go off on another tangent. Let's talk about how social norms can lead society to do some real terrible shit. Let's tackle the easier one, and I only say that because I've talked about it in the past, sexism. Most people can use social norms to maintain objectively bad viewpoints on life and society. In the history of the United States, women were not allowed to vote until the year 1920. And because of this, women weren't treated equal to their male counterparts, valuing their worth as humans based on what they could or couldn't do based on the law. And this goes even deeper. It was not recognized by science that women could achieve orgasm by the clitoris. I'm not lying. That's a real fact. According to the research done for women's sexual studies, anatomical homologies between genitalia were well established. Differing views about the anatomical locus of female sexual pleasure continued circulating throughout the 19th century, and it was not until the early 20th that the questioning of the clitoral orgasm became mainstream in medical practice. For all my homies, we've had the privilege to know that we could sexually stimulate ourselves by ourselves. Think about the amount of dudes who are using this science to get some cheek, and they still couldn't stimulate these women, bro. Them dudes might as well lead a stroke game to golf, bro. They're cooked. And think of the implications that something like this could have. If the social norm is that women can't self-stimulate, ooh, I gotta stop saying that. Imagine the dynamic that's presented. Women at the time were socially conditioned to think that they needed a man to pleasure themselves. That's crazy. What's even crazier is the elephant in the room that the elephant party acts like doesn't exist is racism, and how racism is integrated into every single system we have in society. Racism is complex in how it affects everything, but it's very simple when you use the thing in between your ears. Let's take redlining for example. Redlining is defined by a discriminatory practice that consists of the systematic denial of services such as mortgages, insurance loans, and other financial services to residents of certain areas based on their race or ethnicity. And you think, man, there's no way this is a real concept. But let's look at our favorite way to reside, the suburbs. The suburbs as a concept was a way to escape the urban population, which is just a nice way to say getting away from black and brown people. And who are predominantly in the suburbs? People with more wealth, of course, but more white people specifically. And you can walk outside to your nearest suburb and see this. Well, unless you live in the burbs, in that case, you can just look out your window. And simple redlining has had drastic effects on the black and brown populations in the US. Black and brown people as a whole are not able to receive better education and employment options solely on where they're located. That black or brown kid aspiring to find higher education can't because their schools don't have as much funding as their white counterparts. They also don't have the social mobility to create connections based on their urban location. And this is one of many systems that racism uses to actively discriminate against black and brown people in the United States. Here I go using my degree again. Whoops. Shout out Professor Quinny. And for redlining, this was allegedly abolished in the Fair Housing Act of 1968. This act claimed that it outlawed racially motivated redlining and tasked federal financial regulators, including the Federal Reserve, with enforcement. But you can take a simple look into Skid Row in LA or any densely populated city. You'll see that redlining is alive and well, although it was abolished. What can we do about social norms based on what I've talked about? Unfortunately, not much based on how we currently operate. What we're doing right now is exactly what these systems are aiming for. And all of these issues are by design. But a piece of advice we can use to fight back is really from ourselves. We are the reason why these norms work. We encourage them either directly or indirectly. The best way to change these is to critically think about what we are doing on a day-to-day basis. Think about how everyone almost looks like you, and there's not an identity of diversity in your neighborhood. Think of how some of the women in your life have hooked up with a man solely because they thought that was the only way to pleasure themselves. Simply thinking deeply about these questions on a large scale can drastically change society for the better over time. All it takes is a thought, and that thought leads to a behavior change. That behavior change turns into a social norm that is more equitable for everybody and not just the people you're comfortable with. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like on the video. It puts your boy in the algorithm so everybody can see your boy, BasedDom. Yes, sir, man. Leave a comment. Social norms has been a thing I have talked about since I've been in college, and it's only been more apparent since I've been alive. Tell me your thoughts about social norms. Is this your first time learning about it? Put it in the comments. Let's have a dialogue. And subscribe, man. At the time of me recording this, we are at 1.3K, which is, oh my God, this is crazy, bro. I genuinely am losing words. The only thing I can really say is I really love and I appreciate y'all day in and day out, just being real people, supporting the cause, and having great dialogues under these videos. I appreciate my subscribers, both old and new, because y'all make my journey of being a content creator realer and realer every day, and I love you. If you want to join my public Discord, that is in the description here. If you want to see my public Snapchat, that is also in the description, or it's right here. But yeah, man, it's been BasedDom, people. Deuces.